Buying a home? Don't panic. Just listen to the rest of this podcast. Welcome to Home Inspection Authority's Straight Talk podcast with me, John LaForme. Are you a home buyer, a realtor, or maybe a home inspector? If you are, then this podcast is definitely for you. So let's get right into some straight talk about home inspections. Okay, everybody, welcome back to the show. John here from Home Inspection Authority, and we're going to get into some straight talk about geotechnical engineering and what you need to know when you are considering buying a house that may be on a hillside or on compacted soil and so forth. So I have a special guest here today, and his name is Abe Simantob from LA Private Eyes Engineers. And how you doing, Abe?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. You know, last time I seen you, you took me to some sushi and got me really sick. True story.
Oh,
but I don't hold it against you. I know you didn't cook the sushi.
This is what you get for trying to do a good deed.
Exactly. But anyway, so I've known Abe for quite some time now, 5 or 6 years.
Longer than that.
Longer than that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Stand corrected. So Abe is also a member of CREA, and that's where I met Abe. And he comes in and brushes us up on our drainage issues and foundation issues and everything else like that over from time to time at the CREA meetings. So the reason why I invited Abe on, aside from the fact that he's an awesome guy, and to me, he's one of the best, if not the best in the area as far as when it comes to geotechnical surveys, because Abe uses some tools that I've never seen anybody else use, and that kind of is a very positive thing when it comes to the inspection process of any kind of a house, because I myself use all kinds of tools when I'm inspecting homes, because I think it's just an easier way to making your point. And I haven't seen anybody else but Abe use is that manometer? That's
correct.
I said it right?
Yes.
Okay. So a manometer, which is basically a water level. So why don't you give us a little info on that?
When people buy real estate in hillside areas, ideally it would be nice to drill a couple of holes to take soil samples, to do lab testing. All of that costs a lot of money and takes a long time. So instead of visually eyeballing the house to see if it's level or not, why not use something that has sat there on the land at the property for several years to see how it has performed? If I show our client that the house is level after 50 years, it speaks volumes about how tight the soils are, how adequate the foundations are. Whereas if I do my measurements and find out the house is tilting, then I question whether or not they did cut fill grading, whether or not they compacted the fill, if there's a drainage issue. So every inspection that I do, John, I draw a floor plan of how the rooms are laid out. And I have this machine that's called the manometer or water level. It's nothing, the basic principle of it is when you have 2 cups of water that are connected together with a hose, water wants to be at the same elevation between both cups. If I keep one of the cups stationary and put the 0 mark of a ruler next to the stationary water level, everywhere else where I go with the second cup throughout the house, if the floor between underneath the second cup and the first cup is uneven, the water will move against 0 and I know how much things are off. And when I change surfaces from tile to wood to carpet, or if a step down living room, I take a double shot across all these transitions. So all the data gets adjusted to take into the consideration all those variations. And then you sit back and look at the trend of the data. If all the numbers are the same, that means the surface, the slab or the floor is pretty level.
Okay.
Whereas if I find out that the numbers are, trending in a certain direction, either going up or down, that tells me there's some movement, either due to expansive soils or settling fill soils. And the rule of thumb is usually that the movement, in order for a structure not to have a lot of cracks at the corners of doors and windows, at the junction of walls and ceilings, for you not to have perception of sloping floors, or for doors and windows not to stick, the rule of thumb is that the building is not supposed to be off by more than an inch across a horizontal distance of 30 feet. It doesn't mean if a house has settled or moved more than a couple of inches, it's going to fall down. It just explains why it might be exhibiting some cracks. So,
Okay.
If a house is 60 feet long, it can be off by like 2-3 inches without you having a perception of sloping floors. You go into some houses, you get vertigo when you walk on the floors. It's because they're sloping excessively.
It's my daily experience at work. Hey, you got flow deflection here. What's that mean? Well, I'm walking downhill over here. So actually, you're a little taller than me right now. So, but real quick, back to the 1 inch to 30 foot rule. Mm-hmm. So just so people understand better. So basically, if I walk in the front door, and it's 30 feet from the front door all the way to the back of the house. Mm. And so you were saying 1 inch is allowed, which is typical settlement for any structure, correct?
Right, correct.
Okay. So that's normal. So I want to be clear with the listeners out there. It's my understanding there's no such thing as a perfectly level house.
That's correct.
And that's because they're built on earth. And a lot of things can come into play that can cause that to settle on one corner, settle on one side, and so forth. And that takes us into the whole drainage and how important drainage is, even in Southern California.
Sure. Which
I get resistance on a daily basis from listing agents. Listing agents, pay attention. Drainage is needed on all properties, especially if it's on a hillside. So it's really important to remember that and understand the importance, because lack of drainage leads to inadequate water getting off the property, and that's what leads to settlement as opposed to other things.
Yeah.
So can you fill us in on cut fill and
Sure. Before I go to that topic, I wanted to elaborate a little bit more about this floor level measurement thing.
Okay.
This measurement, like John mentioned, is crucial in assessing structures or properties, because, the last thing you want to do is say somebody's house is sloping when it's not. So this is why you always want to measure. And without doing this measurement, you really don't have an idea what's going on. This floor level measurement is not only usable for evaluating settling due to geologic issues or movement due to expansive soils. It can also be used to evaluate deflection of framing. Like, a lot of people call me for condos and say the floors appear to be sagging.
Oh yeah,
and they're like on the second or third level of multi-level structure. And I explained to them that I'm not a structural engineer. I'm a registered civil and geotech engineer, but because of my civil engineering background, I also understand structures to some extent, but I don't want to pass myself off as a structural engineer, because those guys can also talk about roof and, removing a load-bearing wall and things of that nature, but sometimes we see excessive sagging of floors because of past leaks from kitchen or bathrooms. Like, when I do my measurements, you could have a house that's perfectly level in the lower level because it hasn't settled. It's on a slab or raised foundation. But when I go do the upper level, it's significantly off.
Condos.
Right. And the question is, like, if it was settling related, why aren't both levels sagging by the same amount? So the deflection that you're seeing up in the upper level could be due to seismic shaking, past water leaks or whatnot.
Or poor framing.
Poor framing. Sometimes I go look at condos and there's a significant sag throughout the whole unit in both levels. And the reason for that is because of the spacing of the columns in the garage. It's a subterranean level below these units. Because the cars are supposed to go through, the spacing between the columns is more than the spacing between the parking stalls. And you get some units that are perfectly level and some units that have like 3-4 inch sag.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
So this measurement is pretty good. John mentioned this cut fill business. As I always tell people, God doesn't create level building pads. People come in order to build houses. They make cuts in the hillside area and put the dirt down as fill in the low-lying areas to compact it. And in the old days, when there was no requirement by the jurisdictions for involvement by geotech engineers, soil engineers, people didn't compact the fill as much as it should have been. There are certain things that we do. We remove all the loose dirt before we put the fill down. We bench the fill onto the bedrock. We put subdrains below the fill so water doesn't accumulate in the fill between the contact between the fill and bedrock. These things are usually not done in the old days. And the net result is, like John said, when there is poor drainage, when water saturates that fill, it settles and the bedrock doesn't, and then you get a crack right across that cut fill transition line that goes through the building, and it does havoc to a structure. Houses that are built across cut fill transition lines also don't fare too well in case of earthquakes.
All right, let me ask you a question before you go any further there. So how does one know that there's cut fill?
Very good. When I do my measurements, after I draw a floor plan of how the rooms are laid out, first I look at the lay of the land, right? To see, is this property located downslope of the road? Is it above the road? In the old days when they used to do grading for roads, they would throw all the loose dirt down the shoulder of the road. So that's my first clue as there might be fill there, you know. And I also look at my data after I do my floor level measurements. If I see all the numbers from the road to the far end of the house are sloping uniformly in a certain direction, it's probably a good assumption to say the whole building is on fill. And as you go further down the hill, the thickness of the fill is increasing, and that's why the maximum settlement is furthest away. Sometimes when I do my measurements, half the house, all the numbers are the same. Past a certain region, which we call a cut fill transition line, all the numbers start to dive. So that's when the numbers are all the same, it's probably a good bet that you're on bedrock. And then when the numbers start diving down, that's probably where you're on fill.
So it's your training and experience that determines all that, and your specialized tools.
Exactly.
So let me stop right there for a second, because I want to make it clear to any home buyers or their realtors, a home inspection does not cover this. A home inspector does not have the credentials that Abe has. So if we see flow deflection, we make a note of it. If we see excessive cracking in drywall, the doors not opening properly, like let's say you're walking down a hallway and all the doors on the right seem to have the same sticking issue at the top corner of the doors. Those are notes we're going to put in, and that's going to lead us to recommending further evaluation by somebody like Abe.
Or sometimes you see out of square door frames.
That's true. So that's something I wanted to point out, because as a general home inspector, we're generalists. We're not specialists like this. And a lot of buyers and the realtors just don't quite understand our scope. So that's what I wanted to point that out. So if we say, look, this house is built on a hillside, we're seeing a lot of flow deflection in one area or multiple areas. We're seeing visible cracks in the foundation in one or more areas. We're going to recommend that you get a geotechnical and or a foundation specialist out here to further evaluate the property, because that means something.
And the ramification of excessive settling of the fill, when you're on cut fill, is you can have cracks in the slab, you can have crack in the foundations like you mentioned. it causes, a lot of people assume since the house has sat there 30, 50 years, therefore there must be no issues.
Right.
And I always tell them that's a wrong assumption. It's like, I've been smoking 30 years, therefore everything is fine.
Yeah.
So just the fact that it has sat there doesn't mean it doesn't have issues. These type of geologic foundation drainage issues are all big ticket items to address.
Yeah.
When you have a leaky roof, maybe with $10,000, $20,000, you can fix the issue.
Yeah.
Or if you have faulty dishwasher or whatever, but when you have water intrusion into a crawl space, or if you have excessive movement of a building that requires underpinning by putting some caissons under the foundations to go through the fill into the bedrock, all these are very expensive to address. So this is why you want to do these inspections before you purchase the property. And in addition to that cut fill that I told you about, the measurements tell me what's going on.
Right.
Before I go to an inspection, I also do some research. So depending on where the jurisdiction is, like in city of LA, they keep records pretty good, but some other areas, they don't really hang on to.
Like Beverly Hills?
Beverly Hills is not too bad.
Okay.
But some, like in Pasadena, for example, it's
okay.
very difficult to find a soil report for an existing structure, especially if it's older. Maybe the newer ones have something. But like if there is availability, I try to review the previous soil reports. And sometimes the grading documents tell you where the cut-fill transition line is, how much fill they placed, and how compact it was.
So sometimes there is documentation on that.
It's good to know the history of the property too. Like if there was a landslide there that they repaired, I think it's important to a client to know about it.
Right. So what tip would you give to home inspectors, especially new home inspectors, regarding inspecting a house that's on a hillside or has experienced excessive floor deflection or any kind of, major cracking anywhere on the interior, exterior, or foundation?
Like you mentioned, most of the time, even, if you don't see issues, just to be safe, it's probably a good idea to do it. Like the example I always give people, when I always buy my cars used. I don't buy brand new cars. I buy them 1 year old with a few miles, and I take it to a mechanic to check it out, and they're like, "You're crazy, this has warranty, why are you wasting your money?" I'm like, you know what? I don't know anything about cars or mechanical stuff. I'd rather have somebody tell me that it hasn't been hit, mileage is real. So when you see a lot of cracks or these telltale signs or the issues, or if you see steep topography, steep drop-offs, house is too close to a slope, you really, like you said, don't know what's stable today might not be stable tomorrow. So the best thing to do is, it's expensive to do these inspections, but in the big picture, it's probably a good thing to do.
And what is your basic cost for like a 2,000 square foot house on a hillside?
Nowadays, because I'm so busy, overwhelmed with requests for this type of inspection, my minimum charge is $2,000 for houses that are 2,000 square feet.
Okay.
But that's not just to look at the stability of the hillside. This inspection, everybody does it differently. A lot of my competitors are geologists, and there are a lot of fine geologists. Some of them are dear friends of mine. They don't do what I do, but they know their business. In my line of work, I don't believe when you do a geologic inspections, you're just interested in knowing how stable the hillside is. You want to also know how the geology has affected the improvements on the land. So in addition to making sure the hillside is stable, I also check the house to make sure it's level because of adverse geology. It has not undergone excessive movement. I look at the drainage to see where does the water runoff from the slope go. Is there potential for water intrusion underneath the house into the crawl space, or if there's a subterranean level, is the water coming through the basement walls? I crawl under houses, check the foundations, make sure the concrete has not deteriorated, there's no excessive cracking, you have all the seismic hardware, all the floor posts are straight. And then we followed up with a pretty extensive report with our pictures, measurements, and recommendations.
Yeah,
it takes a lot of work between doing the research at the city and doing all these measurements and different areas that we inspect and putting the report together. It takes several hours for a report to go out.
No, it's a lot of work involved, just like general home inspections. I see you under crawl spaces all the time, and I'm always, when I do see you under there, we typically hang out together. I'm like, hey, did you see that?
Sushi.
I'm like, hey, did you see that crack? And you're like, hey, did you see that water intrusion over there? And we kind of just compare notes. It's funny when we're under the house together. Sometimes we have these walk crawl spaces where we can walk around. Yeah. Which is typically on a really steep hillside. So there's a lot of room in there, so you can see a lot.
This is actually, I take a lot of pride in that because a lot of fellow inspectors like yourself always tell me, hey, it's so strange to see you crawling alongside us in a crawl space. Most of your competitors don't come out there, and we are shocked the guy didn't even go under the house.
Yep.
That's where all the action is.
That's where all the action is, exactly. Attics and crawl spaces are where...
Attics I don't do. That's a structural guy.
Yeah. So anyway, I want to get into a house that I inspected and then referred you to, and I want to explain why I went through that. I came up with that conclusion that, look, you know what? I'm going to refer you to a geotechnical engineer to further evaluate this property because there's been some major settlement here. So the first thing I noticed walking up to this house is in the Glendale area, definitely on what seemed to be a flat lot, but at the back of it sloped down. And so, I can't tell you as a home inspector if the house was on cut fill or anything like that. I'm just like, hey, let's just check out this house and see what we find. And so the first thing I noticed, I parked in the street. Actually, I parked across the street on this house. And then I walked up to the sidewalk. And the first thing I noticed was where the curb touches the street was fine. That connection there was fine. But where the curb touched the sidewalk, I noticed a gap between the two. So then on the other side of the sidewalk, which is where the grass is in the driveway of the house, I noticed another gap, and I'm talking about a 3/4 to a 1 inch gap. And then as I walked more towards the house, I noticed at the other side of the driveway that connects to the garage floor, there was also a gap there as well. And I'm like, okay, this is not normal because this is not what I typically see on a daily basis. So that caught my attention right away, which then caused me to open the garage door and then go in the garage. And inside the garage, I saw a good 1 inch gap between the garage floor and this was a slab foundation house, by the way. And there was also a 1 inch gap between the garage floor and the house foundation, which is just where you step into the house to the garage door. And then to the left of that, I noticed a pretty significant crack in the garage foundation. So, and then I looked around the ceilings and I could see stress cracks on the walls. And I'm like, wow, there's been a lot of movement here. So I couldn't tell right away if this was from maybe a past earthquake that really hit this area hard or what. But I was like, okay, forget about the rest of the inspection for now. I have to dig into this more. So I went out of my ordinary protocol when I'm inspecting a house, and I just continued inside and looked at the floors real good, looked at all the walls and ceilings. Amazingly, inside the house, I didn't really see much stress cracks or anything weird like that. But then when I walked around through the garage to the front door, I noticed there was a crack right across the front entry, which was in direct line with the foundation in the garage if it went left to right. So it's hard to explain this through a podcast, but I'm doing my best. So I noticed that, and I kind of realized, wow, maybe there's some flow deflection here. Let me see what's going on. So I use a DeWalt laser level. I just stick it on the floor, turn it on, and it shoots a red beam all the way across. And if I remember correctly, it was between 4.5 to 5.5 inches of floor deflection across this 30-foot this 30-foot span of house. It was about 30 feet, I guess. And I was like, wow, that's really significant. But the funny thing was you couldn't really see it when you first walked in the house. You couldn't like feel a downhill slope. It was kind of an anomaly. It was kind of weird to me. I was like, let me check that level again. So I checked it multiple times to make sure I wasn't crazy. And sure enough, there was a 4.5 to 5.5 inch drop from the front of the house to the back of the house. And I went upstairs and I got a similar reading up there as well. So this was when I recommended Abe come out and check out this house. And so I'll let you elaborate on that because I can't go any further on that as a general home inspector. I see, all I can tell my customers, look, you have major floor deflection, there's major settling here. And it seems to me that the whole house, one side of the house has dropped significantly compared to the other side. So it didn't seem to me like a crack in the middle of the house with a slab cracked in the middle of the house. It just seemed like the whole house just tilted like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that property. And when I did my research, I found out that there was, that whole lot was a fill lot.
Oh.
So, and as you went away from the street, the fill thickness increased. Fill soils are like a spring. If we have two springs that have the same stiffness, the one that's shorter compresses less than the one that's longer. Even if they compact the soil the same amount,
right?
Just because the fill is thicker, you get more settling in that area as compared to areas. If an area is underlain by 5 feet of fill, it compresses less than an area that's underlain by 30 feet of fill. I drew a floor plan of that house that we're talking about. And this is both the upper and lower level. And this is what I was telling you. I record the dimensions of how long and wide the rooms are, so I know over what distances my measurements are acting. As you can see here, we have deflections that are like 5.5 inches. And the reason we want to know about the amount of deflection is because excessive deflection can cause all sorts of problems in addition to cracking and sticking doors and cracks in foundations and slabs.
Broken windows.
It can also cause separations in roof. You can get roof leaks. You can get separations between roof rafters and the ridge beam.
Yep.
So it's best to the extent possible to have a level house as compared to one that's sloping,
Sure.
And this explained basically what's going on. Now, the big question that a lot of people ask is, okay, is this done and over with?
Yeah.
Is there potential for additional settling? When I deal with houses that have 5-6 inches of settling, I usually recommend further investigation because of the magnitude of movement.
By who?
By someone like myself. There are companies that come and drill holes in the ground, take soil samples, do lab testing.
Okay.
Soil investigation is different than a geotech inspections for escrow. Geotech, when you're in the middle of escrow, time is of essence. So people usually don't have the budget to spend $5,000-$6,000 for a soil report. They can't wait 4-6 weeks for the results to come back. Lab testing takes time, analysis takes time. By that time, usually when we find issues like this, when we say you need further investigation, most clients usually walk. Then it becomes really the seller's issue. They have all the time and all the money and budget to tackle this.
Right.
Underpinning buildings, underpinning is when, like this house that we are showing, that there's like excessive movement settling 5 inches. To stop it from additional movement, we have to come and put caissons, these round concrete columns that go underneath the foundation through the fill into the bedrock. And depending on how deep the bedrock is, the cost could vary all over the place. So that's why you need a subsurface investigation to see how deep the fill is. Sometimes those previous soil reports that you have that information too, like how thick the fill is, how deep the bedrock is. But I don't do this type of work because most of my clients don't want to spend that type of money. But for past 39 years, that's all I used to do is write soil reports and do subsurface investigations.
Oh, that's what you used to do.
Exactly.
Okay, so nowadays to be clear on what your scope of work is. So you're a geotechnical engineer. That does not include soil sampling.
That's correct.
Okay, so if you could, if somebody wanted to hire you for it.
I don't have the equipment for it, but I know how to do these things.
I see. Okay.
As I said, most clients don't want to spend that type of money to purchase a property or to fix it.
Right.
There are companies that do that, but for real estate transactions, because I'm so busy doing these inspections and people don't want to spend that type of money, I haven't bothered to set up $100,000 lab and, set up all the...
I understand. So basically, if you're buying a hillside home and you finish your general home inspection, and then your home inspector recommends a geotechnical survey, then somebody like Abe can show up and take care of that. But then at that point, he may recommend a soils.
Depending if there's excessive movement and there's need for substantial repairs. But remember, when you try to pull a permit for most of these repairs from most jurisdictions, because they're in a hillside area, they're going to require a subsurface investigation or soil report.
Okay.
So you need to do that anyway.
And what do you think a soils report would cost?
They usually start at like $5,000 nowadays.
Okay. So yeah, that's a good amount of money.
$5,000, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good amount of money. Okay. So as far as this particular house goes, your final conclusion was?
There's potential for additional settling. When they fill, like say they filled in a canyon, right? And the house is 60, 70 years old and it's settled 3-4 inches. What I always tell my clients is with good drainage, so there's less potential for that fill getting wet, and barring a large magnitude earthquake, which can damage any property.
Yep.
Probably the potential for significantly additional settling has been diminished by now, because settling of most soils is usually over after the first 10, 15 years of construction. But that's because the fill has confinement from the side walls of the canyon, or if you have a retaining wall, it can't go anywhere anymore.
Right.
But if you have a free face, like a fill slope, and the house has settled 5 inches, who's to say that it's done and over with? It can still go under.
There's no support below it.
Exactly.
There's no retaining walls down there.
Right. There's no side walls of a canyon, so it can still undergo some movement. The problem with uncompacted soil is not only the downward settling movement, it's also lateral stability. They can, a lot of these fill slopes fail. They have slope failures, that are also expensive to repair. We haven't even talked about expansive soils, which could be...
we're going to. Yeah, we're going to get into that too. Understandable. You and I did another house years ago. I cannot remember the address to save my life, but it was in such bad shape. The slab it was a raised foundation and a slab foundation combined on one side of the house, and the slab, I literally tripped over it when I was walking in. There's a shag rug over it. You remember that place?
Yep.
And
Sherman Oaks or Encino somewhere?
I think it was Sherman Oaks in the hills. And and I remember tripping. I'm like, what the hell did I just trip over? I thought I was walking on carpet. And then I pulled back a little bit, and then I could see that there was like 1.5 inch crack, which means one side of that slab was dropped down 1.5 inches from the other. And the house was literally, no exaggeration, riddled with stress cracks on every wall and every ceiling.
Now, in those situations, we're kind of fortunate because the house is talking to us.
Yes, it is.
The fact that it's exhibiting all the cracks and these telltale signs, we know there's something going on in addition to getting that feeling when you walk, you have a perception of sloping floors.
Right.
The houses that I hate are the ones that have all these issues, but the flipper or whoever is selling it has cosmetically painted over all the cracks so you don't see anything. And you'd be darned if you say there's issues, and you'd be darned if you say there's no issues.
Yeah.
I get so many phone calls from disgruntled clients saying, I bought this house 2 months ago. It was pretty relatively, we have had a 7-year drought period. It haven't had significant rains. And when we get these heavy rains, the house starting to crack to pieces.
Yeah.
Not fun.
There's, I did another episode on the podcast about why your drywall cracks and what's considered normal, what's considered, not normal. I did a whole episode on this. So I'm not going to go back into that right now, but just for the home buyers out there, understand if you walk into a house, the one I just mentioned is, like I said, was riddled with cracks. They were everywhere. And I couldn't believe I was hired to inspect the house because it was so obvious there was big issues here. Windows were broken. The frames were bent from all that settling.
A lot of people
really
don't know, John.
I know.
They think it's maybe earthquake damage.
Yeah,
You
that's
figure,
true.
as long as, it was a one-time deal, I patch the cracks and life goes on. Right. But when I do my measurements and find out the house has settled so much and I see all these cracks, I usually tell my clients, if you don't fix your foundations, if we don't stabilize the house, it's a good chance that these cracks are going to come back even after you patch them up.
Yes.
And nobody wants to buy a $2 million house nowadays and
right.
see cracks showing up after you spend $200,000 remodeling it.
So now I'd like to hear your opinion on expansive soil and why it's only in some neighborhoods and not all neighborhoods.
Sure. Expansive soils is something that's opposite of settling soils. And that's usually associated with clay soil.
Right.
Even bedrock. There's different type of rock. There's different type of soil. We have sandy soil. We have silty soil. We have clay soil. And the same thing with bedrock. Bedrock, claystone, shale. Depending on the clay content of the soil can become expansive. Expansive soils are soils that heave, shrink, and swell with changes in moisture content. That's why having good drainage around properties of paramount importance. If you have a bucket of sand and you put a couple of jars of water over it and there are holes at the bottom of the bucket, most of that water comes right through, right? Mm-hmm. With expansive soil, because the soil is comprised of clay particles, which are really tiny. Those clay particles have an affinity towards attracting water molecules. And when they attract the water molecules, the soil heaves. It wants to expand with bloats. So if you have a bucket of compacted clay and you put water on it and have time to see that water percolate into the soil, chances are very little water comes out of the bottom of the bucket because the clay absorbed all that water.
Like a sponge.
Exactly.
It's like a sponge.
It attracts all the water. And then, unlike the settling that the building goes down, expansive soils can push the slab or the foundations of a structure up.
Post and piers,
exactly.
Everything. Yep.
You go underneath the house, you see all the posts and piers are elevated above the concrete pads they were supposed to be sitting on.
Yep.
You see cracks in the foundations. You see cracks in floor slabs because the soil pushed the building up.
Yep.
They can be very damaging. I've been to some houses that because of expansive soil, there were separations between the roof rafters and the ridge beam.
I've seen that. Yep. I've seen all that.
It can be also very damaging. And the reason they're in some areas and they're not in some other areas is because of the clay content. Like a lot of parts of Thousand Oaks, Calabasas, are notorious for having expansive soils. Torrance, some areas that are, normal soil, like silty sands or, sandstone or things like that, don't have expansive soils. Granite. Those are the more granular the soil is, the less expansive it is.
Right. And typically you can identify the expansive soil by the shrinkage cracks.
Absolutely. After the soil dries up, you see pretty good deep and wide shrinkage cracks into the subgrade soils in the crawl space.
Looks like a Utah desert.
Exactly.
That's what it looks like.
Or around the exterior of a building even.
Yeah, I very rarely see it around the exteriors. I mostly see it in the crawl space. And then when I go into like a 1920s garage, the floor is heaved up.
Exactly.
And everyone's like, what caused that? Well, it's lifting up in the middle. I can't see expansive soil or shrinkage cracks around the outside, so I can't tell them that's what it is. I just say, look, you're probably going to have to jackhammer this up, replace it, and report it because that's pretty bad.
And also, to make sure it doesn't come back after they replace the slab, they have to remove that upper 2 feet of the subgrade soil below the slab.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And recompact it with sand. So, because even, you haven't addressed the mechanism that led to the cracking of that slab in the first place. So even if you replace the slab, it probably comes back unless you treat the soil. Since we are on that topic, this measurement that I told you that I do the floor level survey, sometimes I see houses that are perfectly level and the slab is cracking to pieces. And they're like, now what? Like when we do a lot of older homes, and this is where my civil engineering background kicks in. As we know, a lot of older homes pre-1960 didn't have steel rebar reinforcing in the slab. And concrete, in absence of steel rebar, has very little tensile strength. And without rebar, concrete cracks. So combination of lack of steel rebar and poor soil conditions, poor drainage conditions, you can see what it can do to a foundation or floor slab.
So were you saying that the pre-1960s?
Yeah.
Pre-1960s slabs didn't have any?
Most of them didn't.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's just straight concrete.
Yeah. If you were lucky, they had what we call a welded wire mesh. Just to keep the concrete together.
I see.
It didn't prevent the slab from cracking. It was just so concrete stays intact. Their logic back then was, if the slab is not supporting the load-bearing walls, why bother reinforcing it? And then when people started seeing cracks in their floor tiles and attorneys got involved, developers got smarter. They said, okay, steel rebar is cheap. Let's throw some in the slab while we're building the house. So even with doing that, like you said, with the settling of soil or expansive soil, they were seeing some cracks in reinforced house slabs in houses. And then they went to even a more elaborate system. We call it post-tension slab.
I was just going to mention that, yeah.
Yeah, nowadays we have even more elaborate foundations to deal with difficult soil conditions, where you have potential for significant settling or expansive soils. They have these really thick concrete slabs with high-strength steel tendons that they lock the stress into the slab before they build the house on top of it, so it doesn't settle or crack anymore.
And that's typically stamped into the to the garage floor.
In the garage floor slab in a corner.
Yeah.
And that's usually for houses, I would say, within the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
I did a lot of land development in Magic Mountain, northern LA, and a lot of developers put post-tension slabs. And like John said, there's usually a stamp in the corner of the garage slab that says, do not make cuts in this slab.
Very important, people. Listen up.
A lot of people like to go and put a jacuzzi or a safe or something below their slab, and they're like, let's go ahead and make saw cuts in the slab. You're asking for a big potential injury.
Yep.
Because if you cut any of these high tension steel tendons and they snap, they can cut your neck or face in half. You really want to be careful.
Yeah.
If you really want to go there, I recommend you don't. But if you do, you need to talk to somebody professional or somebody to at least do some x-raying to see where these tendons are. Yeah. Maybe you can do it between those tendons, but don't cut the tendons.
Yeah, so be careful out there, all you DIYers who are like, oh, I'm going to install this car lift in my garage floor. And whatever you're going to do. If you see that, look on your garage floor. It's usually in the right or left corner by the garage vehicle door.
Right.
It says post-tension concrete slab, do not cut.
Right.
And that's there for a reason. So if you have to do something in the garage, call the qualified professional to walk you through it so you don't kill yourself or anybody else in your house, because that's dangerous, very dangerous stuff. one thing you just mentioned. So you said back in the day when when the logic was, we don't have to worry about the putting a foundation underneath load-bearing walls if they're not load-bearing walls, right?
Right, the floor slab in the middle of the house.
But there technically is load-bearing walls, unless you're on a truss system.
Right.
So if it's a complete truss system, that may not be considered load-bearing walls because the truss carries the weight of most everything.
Or sometimes they have these big girders that span between columns, and people have partition walls.
Yeah. So like I used to frame houses, so that's why that came up. I'm like, well, yeah, that makes sense to a point, but there's a lot of walls in between the perimeter walls.
And also this settling or expansive soil business scares a lot of homeowners. I get so many phone calls saying, hey, my house is creaking and cracking all the time. I hear these loud bangs middle of the night.
That's this house here we're sitting in right now does the same thing.
Sometimes because of that movement due to expansive soil, when the house is moving, all this framing is moving relative to each other, and that's the noise you hear. Sometimes you also get creaking and squeaking of structures due to thermal expansion contraction of a building during hot summer days and cold nights.
Yep. That's what happens here.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I'm pretty confident that's what it is that happens here.
I had one of these, house was next to a steep drop off a cliff. And this woman swore that, Abe, after we bought the house and you inspected it, I am hearing creaking and sounds. And I'm so scared that the house is sliding down the hill and something is happening here.
Or maybe you haven't called Ghostbusters.
Yeah, and I couldn't understand. I went underneath the house. It was dry. I didn't see any cracks in the soil that telling me about an imminent slide is about to start. And we sat in that living room for half hour to see if there is a sound or something. And then one day when I was driving, the light came on and I said, I bet with you she's having expansive soil issues because they didn't put any of the drainage that I recommended around the building.
And never do.
Yeah. After they fixed it, they never called me back saying they have this sound anymore.
Ah.
So to reduce the potential for settling and movement due to expansive soil.
Stop the bleeding.
Like John said, you have to fix your drainage.
Yeah.
If you don't stop the source of what's causing that soil to either heave up or settle, which is poor drainage, the problem doesn't go away. So, like John said, 90% of houses that we inspect, they usually have some kind of a drainage. They rarely, it's a question of them falling down the hill.
Right.
It's like, hey, this house is cracking because you have water accumulating underneath it. And depending if the soil is clay, it gets pushed up, or if it's loose filled, it gets settled down. So you go to some houses, the crawl space is bone dry. But then when you look at the stains against the footings, there has been flooding in that crawl space before. Or if you see the shrinkage cracks in the soil.
Because every time there's a heavy, high water table underneath a house or actual, inches of water, it's always going to leave a brown stain around the foundation. It's real easy to see other posts and piers as well. It's real easy to see. It's like, wow, there's like a small lake under here at one point.
Or you see a lot of efflorescence, that white salt buildup on the foundation stem walls, which tells you water sat next to the footing and is migrating through the concrete into the crawl space.
And that leads to spalling, which is a much worse condition, and all that. So, okay.
Getting back to this expansive soil business or even settling, we talked about how these different type of performances affect the building. These expansive soils can also cause havoc with retaining walls. I just did a house in Bell Canyon that was 10 feet tall and it was out of level by 12 inches. It had deflected.
What?
I measured the levelness, plumbness of a wall with using a plumb bob. I have a string with a weighted thing.
I know what that is.
Yeah. And because the backfill of the wall was clay, when water accumulated behind the wall, the soil pushed the wall out. And it was like crazy retaining walls are not cheap. They're like $400 a square foot. So if you have a 10-foot high wall that's 50 feet long, do the math, how many square
Ouch.
foot, that's 500 square feet. That's like $20,000-$30,000, repair. Sometimes if they don't backfill the dirt behind the wall, even if it's not clay, if you see when you squeeze soil inside the cup, the side walls of the cup don't even feel the pressure of the soil. But if you pour the soil without any compaction into that cup, the walls of the cup feel the weight of the soil. So that's why we want to backfill the dirt behind the wall so there's not too much pressure on the wall. If the soil is loose, all that weight gets transferred to the wall.
Right. And also, let's talk about the other side of that is when someone's, redoing their backyard and their house has a retaining wall holding up half of their soil that's between the wall and their property and the actual house. You can't just remove that and expect nothing to happen. Well, it's there for a reason.
Well, sometimes I've seen the opposite of it. They might have a little slope around the house and there's a retaining wall there, and they're like, oh, wouldn't it be great if I had a level backyard? And then go slap some bunch of additional bricks on top of the existing wall and then put additional dirt behind they basically extend the height of the wall and put added weight on it. Well, I got news for you. The wall is going to lean because they didn't reinforce it.
Exactly. So let's talk about liquefaction.
Why not?
I can't explain that. I'm going to let you explain that.
Liquefaction happens when you have a strong earthquake, obviously, and for it to happen, you need several things to be in place: shallow water table, loose sandy soils, and a strong earthquake. These are typical situations. I was part of a committee that put together the guidelines for evaluating liquefaction in Southern California.
Okay, then you're the right guy to ask.
I think I know liquefaction pretty well.
Let's hear it.
That type of loose soil conditions is usually present like in Marina del Rey, Venice Beach, or in San Francisco Marina District, where a lot of houses sustain damage due to liquefaction. The best way to explain it is like if you envision loose sand like a bunch of billiard balls sitting point to point. When there's an earthquake...
You say billiard balls?
Billiard balls.
Okay, got it. Like a pool table.
Pool table, yeah. If they're sitting point to point, and when there's an earthquake, that the earthquake forces migrate and come and hit the water table at the property, it causes the water to boil. And these billiard balls or loose sand particles fall in between each other. And then the ground settles, and then you get cracking of a building and all that.
I see.
You get sand boils coming out of the ground because water wants to come up through the soil. But as I said, that's more of an issue near areas that truly have shallow water table.
You said Marina del Rey, right?
Marina del Rey.
I just did a property
Venice
there.
Beach.
I just did a property there about a month ago. And the realtor mentioned to me at the end of the inspection, after I told him what was going on under the house, I had excessive moisture under there. The rebar in the stem wall was completely exposed in one area, and it split, like 10-foot section, a horizontal split. The rebar got wet and expanded.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's a pretty bad condition. So, and then he mentioned at the end, by the way, I was told this was on liquefaction. I said, okay, well, there's a lot of things going on there. No drainage either.
Yeah. That liquefaction, the net result is that some settling and movement. And again, when I do my measurements, if I see the house as out of level in a liquefiable area, then we attribute it maybe due to liquefaction, Right.
Liquefaction only happens if there's an earthquake.
Exactly. Or if you have a heavy vibratory equipment that causes the soil or the foundation to shake a lot. But that's usually not prevalent in a house,
Right.
But going back to what you were saying about I get phone calls from a lot of people saying, oh, our home inspector saw a lot of horizontal cracks in the foundations, like in Palos Verde area or Venice or Marina del Rey. What happens if you don't even have to have liquefaction? You can have in an area with poor drainage, this can happen.
Sure.
What happens is when, you remember I told you the foundation stem wall has a heavy efflorescence on it?
Yep.
That tells you water sits next to the building maybe in a planter or if it's a slope water runoff.
Negative grade.
Exactly.
Right.
What happens is when that moisture sits in next to concrete, it migrates in and corrodes the steel rebar. And when the rebar corrodes, it expands.
Yep.
And that's when you get that horizontal crack in the concrete foundation. And in extreme cases, it can cause the concrete to spall off and you see the rebar.
That's exactly what I saw.
And unfortunately, if the rebar is shot, then you can't just go and epoxy that crack and say you're good to go. But the reason we reinforce our foundations with steel rebar is because, again, concrete has little tensile strength, and with that steel rebar turning into powder, there is no more of that. So you kind of need a sister foundation or foundation replacement in that case.
That's what I mentioned to him. I said, it's probably what a foundation guy is going to recommend is to sister that up.
Yeah, nowadays, when we deal with liquefiable soils, if possible, we like to put the building on driven piles. They come and actually hammer the pile down into the ground. Or they use what we call a mat foundation. We put a really extra rigid slab underneath the structure. So if there's settling, the building it doesn't crack, it just settles. After Northridge earthquake, a lot of people complain that they're having cracking of building either due to being in a liquefiable area or in a seismically unstable area. So the city of LA or state of California put these maps together that identify areas that could have potential liquefaction or could have potentially seismically unstable slopes. And that's based on some of the existing boring data, subsurface information, how steep the topography is, how shallow the water table is. They have groundwater wells around LA, so they know how high the water is, without any regard for the soil type. So there are parts of Westwood, Beverly Hills, Valley, that are, or even in the canyons. You go like Mandeville or Coldwater. They say the soil in the bottom of canyon by Coldwater is liquefiable, but you're nowhere near having a shallow water table or being near Venice or Marina del Rey. Again, that's based on, when there's runoff from the hills and all the water migrates down to the bottom canyon, it flows down the center of canyon. So they're saying during rainy seasons, there could be some moisture running down the Coldwater Canyon, so therefore the soil might be liquefiable. In that case, when I come and do my measurements and the house has been there 60 years and it's still level, then we know liquefaction hasn't occurred there. So again, it all goes with the soil type, locality, knowledge of the area. I have been fortunate. I've been doing this almost 40 years now. And I know...
It's a long time.
Yeah, I know LA area. Most of my inspections are in LA County. I do cover some southern margins of Ventura, like Camarillo and Ojai, or I go on the east side near Pomona, as far down as Palos Verde, that area.
Right.
I don't like to do inspections out of the area that I'm familiar with.
Sure.
That local experience is really of paramount importance. Like if I get a call to go inspect a property in San Diego, I don't know the geology of San Diego like I do in LA.
Got it. Okay. So no Orange County house calls.
I mean, we can still do it, but it's better if I'm so busy covering stuff in LA. I usually don't have time to go there.
Right. So, well, Abe, that is about it for me. I think we covered a lot. Do you get anything else you want to add? No. Any tips for a let's say a brand new home buyer that's going to be buying a house on a hillside? Any tips you want to give them? Any tips you want to give a new home inspector when you find stuff? Yeah.
I always, when I get phone calls because let's face it, $2,000 is not chump change. It's a lot of money.
Right.
And I'm plenty busy. When people call me and they're on the fence and, they are not sure what to do, I always tell them, listen, your best line of defense, in all honesty, is a good home inspector. If your home inspector goes there and he's experienced, doesn't see any cracks, the floors look level, the slope is not too steep, the house has been there for a long time, chances are you don't need me.
Right.
But if your home inspector comes and tells you there's a lot of issues and all the stuff that John has been talking about, chances are when I come out there, I even find more problems. And then,
you're going to be confirming what I found.
It just confirms it and it explains to you why things are the way they are. So having a good inspection is really important. And also for a peace of mind, I have dealt with brand new houses, John, that, I charged some guys $6,000 for like a $25,000 mansion that was brand new. And he was uneasy. He says, this is a, $25 million investment. I want to make sure they built this right. And I said, you're going to pay a lot of money. And he calls me back and says, a lot of my friends are telling me I'm stupid. I'm like, why? He says, this was all approved by the city. Why are you having this guy come and inspect everything, when it's all approved? I said to my client, 2 + 2 on paper is always 4. What was drawn up on the plan and what approved by the city is one thing. How they built it in the field is a different thing.
That's called Earth One.
Right. Lo and behold, I show up on that property, really high-end house. I look at this retaining wall that's not even shown on the plans. You're like, where did this thing come from? And I look at this thing and I'm like, I can swear this wall looks like it's leaning. It was 15 feet. It was hard for me to go above it to hang my plumb up to check it out. And the developer soil engineer tells me, you're dreaming, your eyes are crooked. What are you talking about? We don't build walls.
Your eyes do look kind of crooked.
Yeah. We don't build walls that are that much 12 inches out of level. I said, oh, yeah? So we got a ladder and went up there, and sure enough, we showed him that the wall was not straight, and the guy couldn't believe it, and he walked away from that deal.
Yeah, well, let me add a little more to that.
Building a 15-foot high retaining wall is not cheap.
Right. And just because something is new doesn't mean it was done correctly. Exactly, if that was the case, I probably wouldn't really have a job.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't either.
If everything that got approved by the city was problem-free, we would both be out of a job.
Adding on to that as well, a lot of new houses I do have little to no ventilation under them on crawl space. Brand new properties. I'm like, I hate when that happens because now I have to tell these very excited buyers that these houses are beautiful. And I have to tell them, by the way, you're going to have a major moisture problem under your house.
Yeah.
There's no ventilation.
As we both know, when you go underneath a house, when you turn off that flashlight, if it's pitch dark, or if there's a lot of compartmentalization, interior footings and stuff, you go from one corner of the house to some other, you don't see any openings.
Nothing.
You have poor ventilation. And that's when you need to add fans, ducts, more openings.
Yeah. So it's just a little bit destructive there, depending on how the house is built.
This topic that we are talking about today, we can talk about this for like 8 hours for like a toolbox or something. We haven't really covered a lot of stuff. Like you go to some houses, John, they have re-leveled it.
Yeah.
The house has settling issues and they come and jack up the house and they put a layer of cement or shimming plates on top of the stem wall. Yeah. And you think, therefore it's fine. They didn't address the mechanism that caused that original settling. All they did was temporarily re-level it.
A Band-Aid.
Exactly. So
just a Band-Aid.
You have to be careful out there. Real estate is not cheap anymore.
No, not in this town or any town next to it for that matter. It's absolutely bananas. But my last takeaway for this episode is to better educate people. So that's why I do this podcast.
Bolting, cripple walls, where the floor, where you walk on, sometimes there's a wooden wall that goes between the floor framing to the top of the concrete stem wall. We refer to that as a cripple wall.
Yep.
Nowadays, we're supposed to reinforce that wall with a sheet of plywood so the building doesn't wobble too much in an earthquake. Yep. A lot of houses don't have those.
Right, that's true. So what I want to just end the episode with is, if you're a new home buyer and you're looking at a house on a hillside, or don't be afraid of it. Just get all the facts, and that's what your inspection contingency period is for.
Right.
calling in someone like myself or someone like Abe to let you know what's going on with the house. And as Abe mentioned, he can do some history and look up some history on the house. If there is history, he may be able to find it, which is really going to help and improve his
assessment.
Yeah, his assessment of the property. And as for home inspectors, if this is something you're not familiar with yet or you haven't had to experience yet, it's pretty important stuff. You don't want to overlook this. You don't want to ignore it. I didn't pay attention to that day. Well, guess what? You're getting a phone call later on. Hey, why didn't you tell me this house didn't have good drainage on it or any drainage period or whatever? So if you're a new home inspector, this is extremely important to understand the importance of drainage. And my advice to any home inspector, if you are doing a home that is on a hillside or you have any idea that the lot was on a cut fill, if somebody told you, or if somebody discloses it has liquefaction, and if you notice expansive soil, you need to recommend a geotechnical engineer. I do it every day because I just want to let my clients know, and I don't want them thinking I ignored something.
Yeah.
So that's it. Thank you, Abe. Where can people reach you? Where can they reach you?
Thanks so much for having me. My website is very easy to remember, geo-engineer.com.
All right.
If you ever want to look up, somebody to do an inspection, just search for geotechnical inspection, and my company is usually pops number 1.
Okay, great. And once again, as I always mention, I do have a YouTube channel. We did record this for YouTube as well, so as soon as I get the YouTube video edited and uploaded, I will add a link into the podcast description. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and
thank you very much.
Have a good one.
All right.